Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tonight, I would like to discuss the issue of the land. It looks like it is flared up again. Um, since 2000, when Zanu PF started seizing white-owned farms mostly, the land issue has been on the national agenda. And in spite of Zanu PF's claims that they have resolved the issue, it looks like it's continuing. Let's just watch this video, and I'll invite Mr. Benjamin to give us his comments. But let me square it up, and we can watch it.
Zimbabwe.
Benjamin, what do you say to that one?
Hello, thank you for having me, to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. These are very sad developments that we are seeing unfold in our country. Something that we wouldn't be expecting, government to be doing to its own people that they're supposed to be protecting and providing for. It's, for me, I think it's a very, very sad development, and it's not the first time they've done this. It seems now it's an ongoing process. I don't know what triggers these events or why they can't stop them before somebody builds their or invests their money in these properties only to have them burnt down like that. I think that is inhumane.
Well, the main reason, of course, why it's happening is typical of ZANU PF. The elections are over, and the party now feels confident that it can do as it pleases. These people were resettled as a result of the land seizure that started in 2000. When the party wanted these people to go and occupy the land, they mobilized them. They got them to go and force the white men out. And as soon as the elections are over, the party came back and said to those people who were on those farms, the farm has been allocated to somebody else, usually a high-ranking ZANU PF official, and they should leave. Occasionally, some of those people were allowed to stay. And that is a clear case of that kind of situation where these people have settled on these farms, and some of them would have been there for years. But now ZANU PF is coming back and saying, you don't own the land. The tragedy here is ZANU PF officials, as we learned from, I think you can remember, the report on Bona Mugabe's divorce, where she and her husband were fighting over a property including the farms that they had. The couple had 12 farms. The total area of those 12 farms, you could fit Belgium, a country, Belgium, or a country, Lesotho, into those farms, owned by just one individual. And yet, the same regime is refusing to give title deeds to the rural people to own just 1 hectare, the equivalent of a postage stamp. And yet they own farms the size of a country. I mean, this is what I find so ridiculous about our situation.
You know, the biggest challenge that I see, or something that it baffles me the most, is I am sure that these people, they just did not just get up and say we are going to stay on such a land, or just move, or just decide to relocate. At some point, they must have been promised that you can stay here. And it had to be one of those top ranking officials, like you said, or it could have been given as a mandate from within Zanu PF that gives these people land. And rightfully, you're saying it was an election gimmick just to try and get votes. And after people have voted, they would easily just discard them. And I think that is just, it's just sad and truly barbaric for people to do something like that, especially to fellow human beings and fellow countrymen for that matter. I mean, surely, as you can see, somebody had made their livelihood. There's a crop going on there. There's maize, and they're actually looking forward to making a living out of that land. Then all of a sudden, you burn down the houses, you push down the walls. Truly, that is just barbaric to me. I'm sure something has to give at one point in time. It's either, we wake up now as Zimbabweans to see that, we are being used, because this ploy has always been, used every single time when we are heading towards elections. People get promised a lot of things, and it shows as if there's effort, relocations, you can move here. I still remember at one point the apostolic sector, what they call Mapostori, were told that you can worship anyway. It doesn't matter whether you guys have infrastructure for you to ease yourself, or sanitization areas. They said it's okay. Only after the election, they sent police and soldiers to go and chase after them. And yet these same people, they seem not to learn. I think it's also time where we stop believing what these guys are telling us and start acting, like people that have got at least a brain to think for ourselves.
Well, I've got another video here, which I think you'll also be interested in. It's of somebody who clearly had an extensive piece of land.
Akusiya domasi kwaitireke kukohwa tapiwa 48 hours dzekubva pano. Varungu vakadzingwa mapurazi. Nesuwo nhasi tiri kudzingwawo isu vanhu vatema. Saka pakaipa hama dzangu. Ndozvakaita nyika yedu izvi. Pakaipa saka domasi takurisiya.
Pakaipa mzaya.
Kusiya domasi kwaitirege kukohwa tapiwa 48 hours dzekubva pano. Varungu vakadzingwa mapurazi. Nesuwo nhasi tiri kudzingwawo isu vanhu vatema. Saka pakaipa hama dzangu. Ndozvakaita nyika yedu izvi. Vakubvisa masola vakubvisa masola.
Ndo vanhu vejambanja. Jambanja roga roga maglazi atobvisiwa pamawindo uyu.
Takutoputsa kuoneka. Takuoneka tadzingwa.
Ramba kana rombopinda mbishana.
As we can see from this video, this was actually an ongoing and very productive farming activity. And yet, they're being told you must leave the place in 48 hours. And they've got to demolish it. They had a really healthy crop of tomatoes, and they were growing watermelons and so forth. And this is typical, even if we say that they were told by one politician who didn't have authority for them to stay there, but they wanted the votes. And so they persuaded them to go and build solid structures. As we saw, they were now demolishing a whole house of solid brick because they were told they must move. This issue of the land must be resolved in a more meaningful way. We can't have a situation where those in the ruling elite and their relatives are allowed to own land the size of a country. And yet, somebody is not allowed to own even a hectare of where they build their homestead. It's absolutely ridiculous. The white farmers, the white regime before independence, they also refused to give title deeds to rural people. The land was called tribal trust lands because it was held in trust by the tribe. An individual could not own even 1 square inch of it. And this has been at the heart of our problem. And I think this issue must be resolved, and resolved in a meaningful way. And I don't know whether you've had a chance to think about it and how best to resolve it, Benjamin.
I first of all want to say, the sad part about is, this guy here is, I would like to believe, he's a genuine farmer. He's trying to, to make ends meet for himself, and he had a very, very good crop. That takes a lot of effort, and without any much equipment, he managed to deliver quite a good crop. But then you find out that there are some that of these big top top politicians that have got, like rightfully you're saying, they have got farms the size of another country. And yet they are running those farms down. When they got hold of those farms were functioning, fully functional, with all the equipment that you could possibly need to derive a crop like what this gentleman has. But they have managed to run it all down, and nothing is done about that. Yet somebody that has just got a small little place is being chased away. That is rather unfair. And when it comes to trying to resolve this, I think it's very difficult because of how it was done in the first place. It was just done haphazard. When Mugabe grabbed the land, I don't think he had a plan. All he wanted was to get votes. He was desperate so that people could vote for him. And he just did it so haphazardly. There was no traceability, there was no accountability. It was just, I don't know, it was just a mess. So for us now to try and trace back to see who owns what and what can be done, I think it's going to be a very, very big task. I don't see it unless you try and have an audit where nobody owns the land anyway. So I think if you can just get back the land and figure out what exactly you want to do with the land. If you're going to give people with title deeds, so that at least if they are going to build structures, they know that whatever they are investing is theirs, right? And who owns what? As in, how many farms do you have to start off with? How many are you able to manage as an individual? Are you a full-time farmer? Well, some of these guys, they are located in Harare, staying in Borodale, and yet they got 10 farms across the country, some of which they just run down and they're off to the next. That is exactly what is happening. So it's going to be very difficult for us to say, let us take an audit. It means people have to move. Some people have to relinquish their farms, and that is one thing Zanu PF will not do. They will not want to shake the top because, once a thief, you need to protect yourself. You cannot go and say to another thief that you are stealing. So it's going to be very difficult for him to have that authority to ask questions.
In my view, actually, the solution, yes, I agree, it's not a simple one, but maybe it is even simpler than we want to make it. The issue of somebody in the rural area being given title deeds to the acre or 2 hectares of land on which their homestead is built should not be open for debate. It should not be delayed. The people have waited already 43 years after independence. That should have been done soon as the country became independent. A law should have been passed. People in the rural areas are entitled to title deeds to the land on which their homestead is built. Yes, it may have been 2 hectares, and then people can see what else can be allocated. But at least where your homestead is built, 2 hectares or thereabout, you should have title deeds to that, period. This issue of communal ownership, tribal trust lands, is absolutely utter nonsense. The whites did not want the blacks to have any land because they knew the minute those people have land, they will have a lot of economic power and confidence to assert their rights. One chief who stood up to the whites was Chief Rekai Tankwena. He refused to be moved by the white regimes from the old traditional area where the Tankwena people stayed. They were forcibly removed, and a few months later they were back. And they would be removed again, and the same thing would repeat itself. Because they refused to accept that tribal trust land issue where if you're holding the land in trust, the government can move you. You have no title deeds of any kind. And the irony of it is, blacks were being moved from this traditional land, and then the white man will be settled there. And he will be given title deeds to that farm. He owns that farm. And yet you, the black person who lived there all generations, you are not allowed to own even 2 hectares. I think that situation must be focused on. Yes, we can deal with what happened with some of the seized farms since 2000 and who has got title deeds to it. But the millions of people in the rural areas right now, they need to be addressed. And it is a simple matter to address their issue. Your homestead is built, you are entitled to 2 hectares of that land, so that any improvements you made on that homestead, on those 2 hectares, build a decent house with clean water, toilet facilities, plant fruit trees, have indigenous woodland growing next to it. All those would be part and parcel of the ongoing 2 hectares and your homestead as an ongoing project. If you should ever decide to move, you can sell that as an ongoing project without somebody else coming in like the village headman and saying who else is going to be allowed to stay there. It is your land, your homestead, where it's built, plus the 2 hectares, you are entitled to it. And I think people need to have that mentality and change that mentality and say, I have rights too. If somebody can own the land the size of Lesotho, a whole country, why is it that I'm not allowed to own even 2 hectares where my homestead stands? I find that ridiculous, Benjamin. I think that argument is something that I find ridiculous, that people accept it and take it as normal.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it's a reasonable ask just to allocate somebody that piece of land, at least where your house is. But then again, it's like I said, it's difficult to say. Well, like I said, they just did not up and just go to this place. I am sure somebody gave the directive, but as government, they have not done the due diligence to find out who exactly has done this and what sort of punishment are they going to dish out to this person, and what are they going to do to somebody that is a victim.
No, but Benjamin, what I'm trying to emphasize there is that is a separate issue. Those who have moved to some of these new farms and resettled themselves for whatever reasons, even though some of them, I can tell you now, some of them would have been received the letters from government. Those letters are not title deeds. Those letters could be withdrawn at the drop.
Yes, the leases. I understand. Yes.
Yeah. So in fact, what I wanted to do is separate those two issues. There are those who have been moved to farms and allocated, given letters. Yes, some of them have moved in of their own accord and so forth. But that is one issue. The other big issue is those in the rural areas right now.
If they were to give away that land and give ownership to individuals, they would lose power, they would lose control over those people. You know, this is where it comes back to, you find Zanu PF uses the chiefs and the headsmen and, you know, to intimidate the people. If you do not vote for Zanu PF, the chief will tell you straight away, you cannot stay in my area. So basically what we are saying now is, on behalf of government, the chief owns the land, and that way they have leverage over the people.
Yeah,
So by giving them,
what we have got to be careful about here is try to give Zanu PF the excuse why they should perpetuate the system. You and me agree, totally agree, that if you or me were in the rural areas and you find yourself in a situation where because you didn't vote for Zanu PF, you are going to be moved, it's absolutely absurd. This right to vote is fundamental. But I think the most fundamental right, actually, for the person in the rural area right now is this entitlement to own the piece of land where you live, so that you do not ever have to worry about the headmen threatening you and saying, if you don't attend Zanu rallies, we'll move you. You know, so I think that should be something that should be across the board. It doesn't matter what political party you belong to. This issue of title deeds to the rural people is a fundamental right that should be defended by all without any giving Zanu PF any excuses. They've had excuses for failing to implement that reform for the last 43 years since independence. And this carry on must stop. And I think one way of absolutely making sure that this carry on stops is for the people in the rural area themselves to realize that this is a fundamental right. Right now, if you were in the rural area, I would say to you, you should say to yourself, this piece of land where my homestead is situated and the 2 hectares of land adjoining it is mine. I'm just waiting for the title deeds. And I'll start developing those 2 hectares as if I already have the title deeds, because you should have been given the title deeds a long time ago.
Yes,
Your father should have had those title deeds before you. But we are where we are now. You have those title deeds. And I can tell you something else. If the rural people were given the confidence that they had the title deeds, I can tell you many of them would be building, as we speak right now, decent homesteads, homes meant to last not just 5 years, 10 years, no, for 200 years. Because you know you've got the confidence that even if you're not going to hand it over to your own grandchildren, you can sell it. It's an asset. You can sell it to somebody else who moves there so that you will have the money to go somewhere else and start again. But right now, because you know you don't own that land, the homestead you build, you know it cannot be one to last 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. Because if you were to move, in most cases, you find you cannot sell that house because you cannot sell the land on it. And even building itself. Do you know that If you do not own the land, the bank cannot give you the loan to build a decent structure there because you do not own the land.
Yes, I agree with you. And unfortunately, this is, I'm sure a lot of people had not thought of it that way, to actually think that you could actually, it's your right. I mean, I would like to give an example. I found my grandmother staying, on one of those pieces of land, and I've never seen the title deed for sure. I have seen papers, but those papers, they do not represent a title deed, but some form of arrangement. So I think in
But
their,
in rural areas,
yes,
no. In the rural areas, I can tell you now, no one owns land. That's why
yes,
it's called tribal trust land. You
yeah,
don't
that's what I'm saying.
title deeds in the rural areas.
What they have is some form of an agreement. It's not to say you own the land, like you have title deeds, where it calls you out your name and whatever further documentation that is needed. There is no such. And I would like to think, my granny was just, simple, one that just wanted to farm, one they just wanted, daily life, in the going in and the going out and doing her chores. So for her to think that far, I don't think, she got there. But now that, there are younger people and more education has been input into them, I don't think there should be an excuse now as to why, our generation cannot go and start questioning why they do not have title deeds by now. And I agree with you. It is time that something should be done, regarding that issue, to say, we've been staying here for so long, and in some cases, your ancestors are actually buried, in the homesteads, and you still do not own that land. I think that needs to be rectified, or to be spoken about at least.
Well, at the present moment, with the present arrangement, if the Chinese came to your homestead and they found some mineral there, they will go to the government. The government will give them a permit to mine there. You will be asked to move. You're lucky if you get some compensation, enough compensation to rebuild whatever mud hut you had at your homestead. If you're lucky, you get that much for compensation. And the Chinese will have the right to own that land, to mine it. They will not even dig your old relatives in a decent way for reburial. They'll use a mechanical digger. And in some cases, don't even have any meaningful reburial process. Nothing. This is what we are looking at. The irony of it is, even in the rural areas right now, you have seen some people with businesses. You find if it was somebody wanted to come and start a business, say some of the whites wanted to start a shop in the rural areas, they will be given the piece of land. That piece of land on which they build their shop, plus where they build their homestead, they would own it. such that if they move, they can sell the shop and the homestead. And yet the black person in the same rural area will not be allowed to own the land. Yes, if you build a structure, a house, you can come and say, oh, okay, I can sell the house. But you'll find the headman can say the land on which it is being allocated to somebody else. And the minute that happens, whoever was interested in the farm will say in buying that house, will say, why would I want to buy that house and then find myself in a situation where I own only the house, you know, like an island, like an oasis in the middle of the desert. The rest of the land, the new owner can do whatever they please. They want to do with it. And so invariably, that house is worthless. I've lived in the rural areas. When we had to move, you try to recover as much as you can from the old house. The rest of it, abandon it. Because you'll never get somebody else to buy it. If you're going to give it, you're going to give it away. And so the commitment, the level of commitment on that land is significantly reduced. And I think it's a failure on the part of Zimbabweans themselves to realize that this is absurd. You are a Zimbabwean just as much as Bona Mugabe is a Zimbabwean. She's allowed to own 12 farms whose acreage is enough for Lesotho to fit in. And yet you are not allowed to own half a square kilometer of land. Yet 12 farms, acreage, 30,000 square kilometers. And they are not allowed to own 0.5 of a kilometer of land. It's absurd. The main problem I think we have had in our part of the world is that we have not been really assertive of ourselves, of our rights. You willingly allow yourself to be treated as a third class, fifth class citizen. And of course, if you allow that to happen, those in authority will continue to treat you that way. The whites treated us that way. And after independence, Zanu PF is treating us the same way. And like you correctly said, for political reason, they want to control the people in the rural areas. Zanu PF is, rural areas is Zanu PF stronghold. Primarily because the rural people own nothing. Those in the urban centers, at least the house you buy there, you have title deeds to it. The bank, you would have got money from the bank to build that house. And when you build that house, you own the house plus the land that it stands on. You've title deeds to it. In the rural area, it doesn't matter how beautiful a house you build. You do not own the land on it that is built, that the house is built on. And therefore, then no bank can ever say to you, okay, yeah, I'll give you, Benjamin, I'll give you 40,000 US dollars to go and build a homestead in the rural area. None. Because they know they cannot recover their money. If you should say, oh, I failed to pay for it, you can take over the house. The bank will also find it difficult to sell the house. Because who wants to buy the land, the house, and then find that the land on which it stands, they do not own it. Somebody else owns it. And they will be willing to use that land to the point where you have got, from the house, you've got a few feet just for you to walk on. You cannot do anything else. That is at the heart of the problem. And I think the rural people must, as of now, realize that if they want to claim their rights in Zimbabwe, the right to own land on which they build their homestead is fundamental.
Yeah, so it also goes, it also, people need to be taught, especially some of the old individuals that are in the rural areas. They have been so much oppressed to information, to representation, and even knowledge that such a thing actually exists. The power that has been bestowed on chiefs and their sidekicks, the headmen and everybody. Eh, it, I believe they are semi-gods when it comes to their jurisdiction. So they control what happens, such that people, they cannot voice or ask some of these fundamental things, which are their right anyway. So I think it is now us, the ones that have seen the light, that have gotten exposure, to try and tell them that, what, you can actually explore this here, because it is a basic human right to have shelter that you own yourself, that you can build, like you are saying, you can build a structure, with the king, which is you, or with the queen, which is you, who is staying on that land, whatever you can afford, a decent house, and stop building, the mud houses or the small little round house, because you're not sure whether tomorrow is there for you on that place or not. So I believe you are right to say, there's something must give at the end of the day. I think, as for title deeds for the rural homes, it's long overdue. It's way long overdue. That is why we went to the liberation, movement in the first place, to get the land. That was the fundamental reason why people fought for the country, so that they can own the land. And unfortunately, up till today, it's either you get a release from government, or you get an allocation from the chief, and they can take it back whenever they please. And unfortunately, this is what we need to look into and change.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. We are on to now. We've been talking for about 43 minutes. I think this is an important issue. My closing remark would be, Zimbabweans, I think, have got to wake up to the reality that rights, freedoms, and so forth, if those things are denied, you have got to fight for them. And this issue of waiting for somebody else to fight for you is maybe one of our fundamental weaknesses as a people. No one is going to fight for you. The whites denied you the right to own a postage stamp size piece of land. And yet the white farmers were given land that extended, they had to go on horseback to ride in one direction until sunset. Where they reach at sunset, they put the peg there, and then go in the other direction until sunset, and they put another peg there, and that whole square land is theirs. And yet a black person was not allowed to own even 1 square inch of land in the rural areas. The land was held in trust, tribal trust land. And in this case here, it was meant to be that ambiguous. Tribal means that the whole tribe owns it. And so you, the individual, do not own anything. It was just a way of saying, well, okay, the government can turn around and say, well, this tribe now should be moved from this area to another area. And no one can say, well, the tribe itself, the tribe even itself did not have title to that piece of land. So they could easily be moved. I think we have got to wake up. We can't always look to others to do the fighting for us. The issue of the ownership of the land on which your homestead is built. 2 hectares of land, that is 0.5, half a kilometer square, is not asking for too much. And I don't think the rural people should you need a university degree to realize that if you own that piece of land, you could improve on it. The house you'll build on it with confidence that you can sell that house. Most people would not be staying in these mud huts if they knew that if they build a proper structure, they would own it. They would not be drinking from a shallow well if they knew that if they invested money, sell a goat to dig a proper well that will supply you clean water all year round. You know, if you move from that place, you can say to the person who's coming, I'm selling this house together with all the other improvements I made on it. That person will be saying, well, it has got a well with clean water, toilets, it has got an orchard with fruit trees, 100 of them. It has got a piece of woodland, indigenous trees, which you have managed yourself. That would increase the value of that property. That does not need a rocket scientist to tell you that. And I think this is where we have got a problem. My personal message to the rural people today, even if they are not rural, you've got people in the rural areas who are relatives, you put a peg on where your homestead is built and say, right, I own this piece of land. I've been denied the title deeds by the whites and by the black regime for the last 43 years. I own it. I've got the right to it. And start building a decent house with the confidence that you'll be given the title deed. That is not too much to ask. A postage stamp piece of land compared to Bona Mugabe's, the size of Lesotho, that is not too much to ask. That is my final word to the people of Zimbabwe on this land when we're talking about the rural ownership. Benjamin, do you want to make your closing remarks?
I think you said most of it, and I would just want to say, you know, some of these things are just basic human rights, and you know, we are entitled. We shouldn't be asking. We are entitled to these things. This is why, you know, our fathers went to the liberation war or went through the liberation movement to get land. And then we cannot have somebody, you know, always eager to manipulate us every time when it's time for elections. It's either you vote for Zanu PF or you can kiss your home goodbye. I think now is the time where a lot of us have got exposure. I'm sure everybody has got 1 or 2 people in a family that have that are learned, that can challenge some of these things, and people can start living their lives without fear or favor to to say you owe somebody. Otherwise, if you don't do what they want, you are removed from that piece of land. I also urge the Zimbabweans to start looking into some of these things and help those that probably cannot help themselves to also acquire this land and have that peace of mind. For me, it's not about building a big house, but having the peace of mind to know that you have got a piece of land. If push comes to shove, you can sell part of it and make a livelihood out of something or out of those funds. So I also think this is what we need to look into as a nation. We cannot continue living like this. That's what I want to say, and thank you for having me, and to our viewers, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. I'll just leave everybody with the image of the young gentleman there who was given 48 hours to up his sticks. Just to remind you that what we are seeing there is a healthy crop of tomatoes, which, of course, he cannot take away with him. He's just going to abandon them. 48 hours. I think it is unbelievable that anyone could do something like that. But to be quite honest, this is not the first time Zanu PF has done this. As the young man mentioned at the beginning of it, the white farmers were treated in exactly the same manner by the Zanu PF government. They were told they could only live with the clothes they are wearing. Everything else must stay behind. No doubt, one of the Zanu PF chefs has got their eyes on this farm, and they will see to it that the tomato crop is not completely destroyed, and they will move in and claim it and pocket the profits. This is the tragedy of a dictatorship. We have got to address it. And I think we should address it. And it is a pity that we have allowed this madness to continue for far too long. But again, once again, thanks very much, Benjamin. And maybe tomorrow we could take up on the same issue. What can these people do who were settled but never given title deeds? But until tomorrow, thanks again, Benjamin, and thank you very much to the listeners.
Thank you.